Okay, so I'm going to jump back into, and we're recording live now, I'm going to jump back into the jazz quintet or quartet, whatever it was, that we were doing last week. And I'm kind of going to just recap some of the stuff we talked about last week. I'm going to move kind of fast then, right? Because we can cover this. So one of the first things you'll see is when I organized it, I put it in order that makes sense to me. It might not make sense to you. Let me just hide a few of these view things so we have more. Channel strip components. We do not need audio device to control. We do not need settings menu. We do not need gain reduction meter. We don't even need the EQ thumbnails, really. Okay, that will just allow me to bring this up a little bit so you don't have to be looking so low on the board. Now you can get confused because it's there twice, so I will just do that. How's that? Does that help?
Yeah.
Yes.
I wish it had a mixture of this.
Okay. So what I've done over here on the left is I always like to go drums just because I was trained that way. Drums, bass, accompaniment, lead. Right. So here we go. I start with the drums here, but these are the ones that are going to a bus of some sort. You look at the outputs, right? Then I get over here. Now I'm getting to sounds that don't need to go through a bus or are the bus. So now the kick is just going by itself. The toms consist of these two toms. The snare, by the way, I would usually have the tom and the snare reversed there. Overheads, and then all those go into the drum bus. So these are sub buses here, although the kick isn't really a sub bus, but it's going into the drum bus. So then I know right here, if I turn up or down these purples, all the sound goes on or off in the song. Whoop, the whole song's gone. So if I need to go over to my master and like I'm not getting enough compression here, or the add limiters, the adaptive limiter is too low, and I need to turn up the song going into it, I can just control it right here, right? Does that make sense to everybody? And the colors really help me see that.
How did you link them all?
I've just drug across them like this, dragging across them. Now they're joined. You can create groups, but actually it ends up being more of a pain in the butt than it's worth. I find that buses are better.
If you wanted to unlink one of them, you would like hold down shift. And
I just click on each one individually, and yeah, you don't have to hold down shift. It's a little weird. Then here I have my sends, or my aux returns, and these are reverbs basically, where the sound's coming back. I don't have to adjust these because as I adjust this, if I turn this up and down, it turns the amount going to the bus up. Why is that? Because if I look at this bus right here, it is post. Oh.
What?
It should be post fader. I would like it to be post fader.
Some pre-fade.
Post. I don't know if post pan is pre fader or
I think it might be
post-fade or pre-fade?
post pan must be.
Wait, what? Yeah, it's pre-fade or post-fade.
Yeah, why would you have
I'm confused there. What that is? I'm almost certain. I know this. No, I know that is post. What they're calling post pan is also post fader. Because if I turn this down, there's no reverb coming from the drums anymore. Whereas if it was pre fader, meaning the sound was coming out before the fader, the sound was being sent over here to the fader. If I turn this down, you'd still hear the same amount of drum reverb there. Which you don't want, because I'm like, oh, the drums are too loud in the mix. Let me turn them down a little bit. I also want the reverb on the drums to come down with it. Right? So these are the purples then become my overall mix, how I mix the overall level of the song. All this feeds into that. Does that make sense? Questions? Okay. I'll wait for Nigel to get here just to retouch on the phase. How does everyone feel about the phasing and doing the metering on the phase and be able to line up phase? Raise your hand if you got that and it's easy. Raise your hand if you don't have that but know that you can work on it and figure it out. Raise your hand if you want me to cover it again. One person. Okay, so we'll wait for Nigel to get here because I know he has some questions on the table, and I'll go kind of quickly on them. There were a lot of problems with the song. This is a difficult mix. If you found this an easy mix, then I want you to keep working and developing your ear. God, I don't even know where to start because they're all difficult. Should I go back and talk? What do you want to talk about? Drums, bass, guitar, or sax?
Bass.
Bass. Okay. The bass was the easiest, I thought. Just after saying it was hard. Now, this bass here is a track. Let me go find the bass. Now, the bass is a tricky instrument, right? And you remember we had him record. We had him record the different notes of the bass here, right? So I actually did. I used that. I went here and played. Well, somebody took away my EQ shortcuts, so now I can't see them. I looked at the lowest string. Well, I talked about this a little bit, right? I watched those frequencies, right? I can see that's the lowest string right there. So the lowest string goes up to about here, about 75. Next string will start a little bit lower than that, 60 to 100. And the next string is what, maybe 75 to 150. Next string will start about here. Yep, go up to about here. Goes up about an octave, right? And the next string goes about 100 to 200, I think. So I'm looking at those fundamental frequencies on those strings. There it goes. Okay. I use that information then to figure out where I am. Set these bands on the multipressor. Okay, and I have acoustic bass. I pretty much always use the multipressor now, just because those strings are so different. There's a duck sound up there, and there's this down below. Same instrument, but it's not very homophonic. Not very homophonic. See? So that's easy, right? And then it's like, well, how the heck do I know what to set my attack and release times at, right? I don't know what to set those attack release times. Well, let me show you how I got there. And I realize this is totally wrong, which is hilarious, but that's fine. Okay. So then set the bandwidth on the multipressor, but now I wanted to figure out what sort of attack and release times I want to be looking for on the multipressor, okay? So I opened up a regular compressor on it. I picked jazz bass to start with. It was this white one. Worked pretty okay, right? Look how much louder some of those notes are than others. You see that? Just like some of them are going. Some of them have almost no compression, and some of them have 10 decibels of compression going on them. So, first thing I do when I come to a compressor is I'm going to look at the attack portion. I'm also going to look at the knee, but because I picked jazz bass as a preset, I'm going to leave the knee where it is. I tend to go with the hard knee, which means the compression, as soon as the sound goes over the threshold, the compressor starts reducing it right away. It doesn't kind of gradually move it. It has a strong effect. So I'm going to try to identify attack time now by dragging the threshold way down, probably bringing the ratio fairly high, somewhere around 8. That's limiting. And I'm listening for the click sound on the bass. Let me just cycle that. Just that first sequence right there. See if you can hear the attack disappear in this when I bring it to 0, which is how I often have to go. You hear it go away? You ever hear that? We bring it back to 40. You hear the finger when his finger plucks the string there. And it goes away there. I can kind of see in my mind's eye, I see a waveform, and I see this plunk at the front, and then when it's at 0, the attack time is 0, I see that it's gone. It's all the same level. You should all be able to do that. Ever feel like they can do that? Pull up that bass sound and hear that time. So then I've got to decide, what am I looking for on this, right? Well, it's a finger and it's a big fat string, so I know that there's a really thick clunk there. And in jazz, you want that. In fact, old jazz, that was the kick. It was the bass moving around down there, right? The kick drum, in fact, still is a lot of times. The kick drum's really used. It's the thump of the big fat double bass there that is giving the sound its low rhythmic quality, right? So I really want a strong rhythmic quality in that.
Would you want to turn off auto gain?
Yeah.
No, I want auto gain on because I want to be able to A/B it. right? Maybe it. So I went in and I turned this up until I felt like I was hearing the point where I could hear that pluck and no more. I didn't want to go past it because I do want to use that compressor to control the level, right? So if I don't turn the compressor on soon enough, the note is really loud or really quiet. So I want to tune that compressor on as fast as I can, but still hear the pluck come through. Does that make sense? So I'm looking for that point where I stop hearing a change in the sound as I increase the attack time.
So in so many words, you're kind of shaping the transient.
I'm not in so many words. I'm exactly
Okay.
shaping the transient.
Actually,
Actually, I'm not actually shaping the transient. I'm shaping the envelope.
Okay, so
And I'm letting a certain amount of the
transient through, and then
turning down the sustained level. That's exactly what I'm doing. Okay. This is volume basically. I'm dealing with volume here. I'm turning up and down different parts of the envelope. Okay. If I have a fast attack and a fast release, I just killed the transient and left the other part the same. If I have a slow attack and slow release, I'm letting the transient through, but not the rest. Pluck, 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 pluck. Okay? But I know I want to control that note. Some of them are way too loud, some are way too quiet. I need to be compressing the notes, but let me do it right after the transient gets through. Does that make sense? So I come here. You need to set your release time long enough that you can hear it. If your release time is too short, you won't be able to hear your attack well because it'll be releasing so fast you won't know it's there. We'll talk about that in a second. So I usually will set it in the middle or even long, but usually somewhere kind of in the middle like that when I'm trying to set my attack time. Start my attack at 0. Now by drums, right here, I'm starting to hear that it is not having as much of an effect by 10 milliseconds. Guitars, by 20 milliseconds, I'm starting to hear not much change. This bass, as I increase it, I'm still hearing more plunk as I move up towards 50. Hear that right in there? You can start to hear his finger. You did a really good job on yours, I think, right? Did I comment on yours?
Yeah.
Now, when I get up here to 120, can you hear how it's starting to sound out of control? And that's because the compressor isn't coming on enough to control the note overall. So not only is it letting the attack through, now it's letting through part of the note, and the note is starting to spaz out a little bit. Let me back up a little bit here. I'm trying to control the note, so I'm going to back up right. You're going to hear around 50 or so that we get past the transient. By the time we get up to 100 milliseconds, you're going to start to hear the note is starting to sound loud too. Here we go. Hear that? Boom. Boom, boom, boom. So we got this transient, and it's great, except for now we have the problem of certain notes being way too loud. So I'm looking for that point right where enough of the transient's getting through, it's got that nice thump to it, but then I'm able to control the note, and I ended up somewhere around there. Somewhere around, 44 milliseconds. I often end up in that range for things like the bass. Questions on that? Then, I had a ridiculous amount of compression going on, so I probably would turn this so, I might leave it right there. Somewhere in there. It's moving in this range. Now, in my first classes, I was always telling you don't go past the -5. I'm going to start saying, when you're working with these live instruments like this at this point, don't go past the -10. Okay? If you're working with loops, don't do that. That's going to be way too much compression because they already have compression on it. Okay, but when we're working with an actual live performance, especially a bass and vocals, you're going to be easily at 10 dB of reduction in the loudest notes. Okay. So there it is, hitting about 10. And that sounds about right to me. And then what this literally becomes here is my volume control. Actually, these two things become the volume control in the note without affecting the transient. If I want the note to be quieter, I turn up the ratio and extend the release. If I want the note to be louder, I shorten the release and reduce the ratio. Now here, when I reduce the ratio too much, I'm not compressing. Did you hear how loud that first note was? It's too loud. So I know I gotta have that ratio at least 8-to-1 in this situation. I ended up really high ratio on this one. and then I'm using this to adjust how loud the envelope is. See if you can hear how loud it is right there, the note. And then now I'm going to turn the release down, turn the release to a longer time, and the volume should turn down on the note. I just turned the volume down on the bass. Louder, more down. The impression I get of this, if this attack is set at that point, that right as the envelope is moving from the transient to the sustained part of the phase, gives me the impression of the shorter the attack, the more in my face the sound is going to sound. The longer the attack, the more depth, the further away it's going to sound. AKA also louder and quieter. I'm turning up and turning down the sustained portion of the instrument. I cannot set this really well without hearing the rest of the instruments. I'm guessing somewhere in the middle. Sounds kind of good there, but until I hear it in the mix, I can't tell, does that bass need to be a little further back, or does it need to be more in my face? So I'm going to mix the attack, and then I'm going to adjust the sustain by adjusting the release time. The other thing I added on this bass was a limiter. Now the limiter will limit, because I'm still letting those attacks through, the limiter will make sure none of my attacks are way too loud. And so I do that by doing this. I drag this down until I see the red light come on a little bit. Oh, there it is. Some of the notes the red light comes on, and some of it doesn't. Now I'm controlling the attack portion as well. Questions on that? Last thing on this, the distortion. And I found that I was using it a lot in this mix in ways that I hadn't before. Distortion adds high frequency information, right? But it adds high frequency information by ruining the loudest parts of the sound, right? By crushing them. Remember that square wave? We crushed that wave down there. So it also has the effect of softening the sound while adding high frequencies. That's what distortion does. It actually makes the sound less attacky and less smacky. When I was working on this mix, I was really able to use the distortion to alter the high frequency information in the sounds. I didn't need a whole lot of it on this bass, but when I got over to the sax, I found I really needed it because the sax is way too harsh and bright at the tops. So I was like, oh, if I distort it, it makes it more noisy but less harsh, less pokey. That makes sense? So here, no distortion. See if you can hear that click over there. For me, it's coming from over there. I don't know why. It's all mono. Click, click. And then if I turn this soft on, it's a little bit softer. Those clicks are not quite as bright. See if you can hear off. On. Pretty hard to hear there.
More piercing with the soft.
Yeah, well, yeah. Let me talk about that more when I get to sax. The main reason I have the soft distortion on there is I think it was in the preset. And I'll talk about that more on the sax, because that was not very obvious. So that's how I ended up with my bass compression, and then I looked at this and I said 44 milliseconds, 110 milliseconds, great. Then I went back over to this. Now I don't think it shows. Close, 65 milliseconds. I was in that range. 65 milliseconds here. And I realized I had these all backwards. I want these to be peaks, so I want them to only hit the loudest notes here. So actually I would change these like this. And then I'm looking here for, you can see how the different ones are moving at different times. I don't want that. I don't want 10 dB of compression on this. I want a little bit less. And I only want it to kick in when a note is really loud. So I'm going to bring my threshold up somewhere in that range. Whew, really, that one note is really, you see that first note is really loud. You see that? I'm trying to use this guy to keep it down. So my idea on this is that it's only kicking in on the loud notes when it needs to. This I'm trying to solve a technical problem with some frequencies being way louder in the bass than the other. Whereas this one, this compressor, I am using to reshape the envelope. Obviously, I'm using some limiting on it, but a lot of it is I'm using it to reshape the envelope to get it to fit into the mix and have control over how it fits into the mix. Yes? That work? Okay. So again, this just trying to control the problem, this actually shaping it into it.
You defined your ranges in your multipressor based on what you saw when you analyzed him going up each string.
Each string.
All right.
Yeah. Not sure it was that critical. Well, I was surprised how close they were together. If I had done this just by my ear, I probably would have stretched them way out here. But I realized all that information is very tight together. Those octaves, from 40 to 80 is an octave. It's like, wow, those. I think a 40 and 80 is really close together, but they're not really, right? They're a long ways away. That's how I ended up with my bass sound right there. Oh, and then of course, for me, I would never play bass. Oh, and let's listen to that. Here's how the bass sounded. Then I turned the mix on, and I listened to about where I want the bass to be, and this now becomes a fader, if you will, a mix of the high level of the bass, and how I hear high level of the bass. So how the bass is going to sound on those speakers versus these speakers is very different, right? We hear on a low frequency on these, but as soon as I go to these, you don't hear any of the bass. And so then I had used this literally to adjust the amount of bass on crappy speakers. It's like another level. So now I've got this fader controlling the level of bass. I've got my release time controlling the level of the note. I've set my limiter and my attack in such a way that most of my attacks are going to be pretty similar, so I hear every bass note. And that's when I was listening to your guys' mix, there were some bass notes I didn't hear at all. I couldn't hear them at all. What I'm guessing is that you weren't letting through enough of the attack consistently, and then perhaps limiting some of those attacks so that the quiet ones could be louder. When you listen to my mix, you hear every single bass note, and it's in the same space, and it's a relatively similar volume. Right? Relatively similar volume. That's how I did that. And that you can also hear it on small speakers because I added 11.5% of harmonics starting at 2K or 200 hertz, which is really low. I was surprised. I don't normally do that. I went from this to this. I can't even hear a difference there, right? But right there I can. So I'm making those louder notes louder. The higher notes louder. Gets all harsh and fast, right? Off and on. That is how much bass is going to come out of these speakers. And I just drag this down so if I have the whole mix going. Whoever's clicking, can you leave, please? It's distracting. Sorry. Listen how you can hear the bass notes, right? You can hear each one. He's way up high there, right? There's no bass, right? Bass isn't strong, but there's a lot of it going on. And I'm going to turn up the bass now, artificially loud. Listen to when I change these harmonics. There's just the high part of the bass. Why did I have this frequency so low here? This song has a big hole in it. That sax is up there pretty high and bright. the guitar is really dark in the accompaniment. There's not many overtones. It's down around 200 hertz. There's not a whole lot going on between 200 and 1,000 in the song. It's empty. It's empty. I wanted to fill that space up with some sort of information, and the bass was a way to do it. So I added. Normally I might only be adding high frequencies of the bass starting about here because that's where the pluck sound is. But I was like, you know what? I need that nasally sound. Hear it there in the middle now? It's below the sax and above that guitar, oddly enough. And then I changed the level on that. Once I found where it was, I changed the level on it using the amount of harmonics. Make sense? Questions on the bass? Okay, well, let's hop over to, what do you want, sax, drums, or guitar next? Sax, okay. Sax, the lesson on the sax was...
Do you recommend like getting, because a lot of people either listen to their music in cars or like on a Bluetooth speaker. Do you
all the time
recommend like mixing on a Bluetooth speaker also?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm starting to get to where I mix on the shittiest speaker I can. Sorry, that's on recording. Damn it. Yeah, I'm doing this. I'm actually even making it mono on, and then I'm unplugging this and I'm playing it out of these speakers and doing a lot of my mixing here, and then moving. So, Chris, I'm answering your question. You're talking. Okay, well then, don't worry. All right, so sax. Sax had a similar number of problems, and the biggest problem happens right, especially on the second take. Ooh. Can you hear how harsh that is? Good, because I don't want to turn it up for you. So. And this has been the problem. This is where they talk about ribbons, and so you've heard me denigrating ribbons quite a bit this semester. And for the first time, I thought, yeah, oof, that's a little bit much, right? So, and you can see it, right? All that high frequency information coming on there is just too much on the sax. We should have used the 440 on the sax. Now, I got a feeling this mic's going to work well on a section of saxophone. But if you remember when he was playing this, I think he was blowing about as hard as he could. I'm not sure why he was blowing it quite that hard. But he's giving it a lot of energy. And then the condenser mic is just like, energy, I love energy. Let's put more on it, right? And it's too much. I've come of the mind now that if there's a choice between harshness on the condenser and not enough brightness on the ribbon, that it might be actually easier to add that brightness on the ribbon than it is to remove the brightness from the condenser. Right? Because the brightness isn't happening on low notes. The brightness is only happening when he's hitting it hard, right? So if we EQ it down and make it less bright, it's all going to sound dark, right? And we're like, oh man. So what do we have to do? Well, of course, we got to come in with the multipressor again. So let me show you how I try to tame the high frequencies. First thing I went over here, because there's no analyzer here. There should be. And I saw that 5K range, right? Right there. About 3K up when he hits that one note, man. Woof. It's killing me. So I came over here and I set that compressor somewhere around that range. I'll come down around there. I bypassed all these other things, and then I came here and I said, look, I want it to be peak. You guys know what RMS means? What does that mean?
It's like the average level.
The average level. Okay, so this compressor has the ability to work on the average level or just the highest notes. And that's weird for most of us because we've learned compression as being only the highest notes. A way to think of this is hard knee, soft knee. Hard knee, soft knee. Okay? This means it starts interacting right away. This means it's going to take a second to interact because it's going to adjust the overall level. So I'm like, I want it to come in pretty darn. I want it to start taking effect quickly. Look where I ended up with the attack on that, 0.5 milliseconds. Rarely have I ever used an attack that low. In fact, the lowest I've ever used. And I have a pretty quick release on it. Then what I did is I actually made up the gain a bit on the high frequency so that when it wasn't attacking like that, there was still plenty of high frequency information on the quieter notes. I don't know that I need to do that. So these are harsh ribbon speakers too, so let me show you what it sounds like. And let me just loop that section. Should be nice if you could see it, right? Okay, here we go. I'm going to adjust the, what am I doing? Oh, turn on. Oh, hear the difference? That's pretty extreme, right? Yeah. I can't believe I had it that extreme. That's pretty extreme. Versus. Now listen, I'm going to adjust the attack time from, I'm going to start it at 0, I'm going to start to move up. I think by the time I get to 5 milliseconds, you're going to start to hear it. You're going to start to hear that brittleness come through. Let's see what happens here. So I'll start at 0. You can already hear it here. So there's 5, here's 0. Thank you. That off. I'm like, I'm not hearing a difference. Okay. 0. Let me just jump to 5. Yeah, not as much as I thought. You can hear it though, right? Watch when I go, I'll go to 10 just to make it a little more clear, and I'm going to drop it down as he's playing to 0. Right there, it gets really harsh, right? Still sounds too harsh to me there. I ended up all the way down there at 0.5 before I was like, I'll take that sound. That's the most compression I've ever put on anything right there. And then I adjusted this until it sounded reasonable, because here it sounds too dark, right? I just listened. So it sounds like a sax. I'm a little bit. Oh, I ended up in the same place. In the same place. Got it? That was a pain right there. That was a pain. And unfortunately, it takes really good speakers to hear that. Because the tweeter has to be able to respond fast enough to show you what's really going on, right? Probably most of our headphones don't do that. And that's a difficulty. So when I heard a lot of your mixes, you had that harsh River's Yours pops out to me. When that sax started up, I was like, woo! I was like, I gotta take these headphones off. Because that high frequency, and you might not have been able to hear it on yours. Then what did I do with the compress? Then I went. Here's the other thing. I spent a lot of time on this sax sound. Way more time than I wanted to spend, considering it was that really good mic, right? Trying to tame that harshness. Let me see if we can hear it here. So let's. I did this compression before I did the multipressor on there. Let me turn it down to play again. Kind of the same technique here. I set this in the middle, set the ratio somewhere in the middle, drop the threshold all the way down, and listen, explore the attack range. Oh. That might be not enough attack, right? There, the notes are too loud. Man, it's harsh, right? So I brought this down. Right about there, I can hear where it's moving from the envelope to the sustain portion. And then I'm going to just set it so there's a reasonable amount of compression. I brought the limiter down on those loud notes because they were really loud. These are the loudest notes in the song I happen to get. And then I saved my release time for when I'm listening to the song, but I can hear the difference between this and this. Here it's more in your face, and here, basically you're turning out the volume, right? So think of that release really as like a volume control on the notes, right? Okay. Then I'm like, how can I get rid of this harshness? I'm like, this is terrible. Like that, right? Well, I thought, well, let me try distorting it. So I did. I put in the soft. Oh, would you hear this? You hear I got softer there?
Mm-hmm.
Let me play soft and hard. Hard. Not as harsh, right? And I'm like, well, if that's good, then clip must be better. I don't hear as much difference between the hard and clip as I did between hard and soft. So I'm using distortion. What's that?
Did you turn it up or down on that?
Yeah, it's funny. So it's actually getting more distorted as I go.
Yeah.
And what more distortion means, smashing those high amplitudes more, and you're making more high frequencies, but the high frequencies there aren't poking through as loud. Does that make sense? They're not shooting through because it's being crushed.
I'm trying to make sure I understood you were turning it up, though.
Yes, I was adding, I believe the way this is working is adding, I'm fairly certain the way it's working is adding more distortion as it goes. More distortion. So I thought that was kind of interesting lesson for me about using the distortion to control the harshness, which I had never really done before. And it worked pretty well. Ended up somewhere in there. I can't, probably right about there for somewhere in the middle. And then I still had to go back and do this guy. It was after I heard Reverb, so I was like, okay, that's too harsh. Much darker, right? Now, I know I can just go back here and I can control this level here for the high, just like I did with the exciter on the bass. I can control the crispiness of the sax once my mix is going. Set the sax about right, and then I have a separate control for the high frequency in the sax. Does that make sense? Like my own little level control. I can either control it by auto gain, or I can control by changing the threshold of the limiters. Or not the threshold, not the ratio, sorry. I can say, here we go. Really dark, right? Not so dark. Really bright, right? I don't remember where I ended up exactly, but somewhere in there. That sounds pretty. You wouldn't know that was happening unless you'd heard the other version, right? Then on sax, I wanted some reverb, so I picked I talked a little bit about this one, the City Street reverb, and I found myself really messing, once the rest of the mix was going, with this pre-delay, and I ended up with a fairly short pre-delay on this. Short pre-delay. As opposed to no pre-delay. 7, here's the long one. It means I can't tell anything there when I hear it like that, but when it's in the mix, especially if I'm finding if I put it in mono, I listen to the mix in mono, or I listen on little speakers, that I can hear that relationship between the sax and that reverb coming in behind it, and determine how that sounds good in the song. And I'll talk about reverb a little bit more next time. So where I ended up there. And then, I don't even remember if I had these on. I can't remember. I had a slapback probably. And then I probably had a little stereo delay left and right. Yeah, 73 milliseconds. Just to give it a little breath. Let me turn those up so you can hear them. And then a little bit more of this one. Do those need to be there? I don't know. Probably not. The sax reverb was probably enough. But I feel like I should have some delay, so I put some delay in. Okay, let's talk about the guitars real quick, because I have just enough to get through that. And then we'll talk about drums more next week and reverb next week. So, sorry?
Nothing.
Okay. So the first thing I had to do with the guitars was check the phase. Here's the guitars. I decided that the SM57 was too harsh. I was just talking to someone yesterday who was saying Slash always has an SM57 and an R121, and I was kind of like, well, that might be right. I almost ended up with that. Somehow I ended up with the two R121s, and I was finding it was easier to add excitement to the R121s than take harshness off of the SM57s. For whatever reason. Sorry?
I didn't quite catch what you said they did.
They did or I did?
I wasn't sure what you were saying. You said you went out with two R121s.
I went the two R121s, and then I decided that I could add excitement to the R121s easier than I could take harshness off of the SM57s.
Oh,
So, and you can see I didn't have to add a whole lot. At about 1,000, I added just a few harmonics. We'll listen to that in a second here. So, the guitar was equally problematic. First is that jazz guys like to play with guitars that sound like mud, right? That's as bright as it ever sounded. These speakers make it sound nice and bright. So, but if we look at those frequencies, it's all around 200 hertz, right? Oh, look at that! I even used EQ. No, I didn't. I turned it off. No, I had EQ on. So one of my few occasions where you're seeing me use EQ, it was just too much. Look at that. It's like, that's almost like a sine wave. There's not much else going on there, right? Hardly any overtones. A few there. But these are notes really empty in the middle. And in all of your mixes and in mine, it was just like, I can't hear the guitar. Oh, there's the guitar. Can't hear anything else. Oh, can't hear anything else. Oh, there's the guitar, and I can't hear anything else. Like, it wasn't blending in with the mix at all. It was either no guitar or right in your face. And I'm like, man, how do I deal with that? Well, I ended up, I can't remember now what I did. But, well, at first I added some exciter on it, which, of course, then didn't work when we went to distortion. So I'm going to add this, see if we can see any of the high frequency information that got added. Yeah, you can see a little bit more up there, right? That's off. It's darker, brighter, right? A little more high frequency. I could have added. Pretty wild what a difference that exciter makes, right? I had to leave it pretty low, mainly because I was lazy and didn't want to make a separate track for the distortion guitar, and it was too harsh for the distortion guitar. Then I went in and I put in the compression, and I kind of was using yeah, I was using the same technique here, and what I ended up doing was just, I'm listening to sound. I ended up just crushing the attack on the sound and making it very short. I'm trying to think back. I think the way I started actually was I was on the distortion guitar. I'm sorry. When I was first examining this. And I was dealing with that some of the right here. Woof. Like, bang. So I had to turn the exciter down quite a bit for that. And I wanted the guitar to really be, and I'm starting to listen to the mix overall now, and there's that big hole. There's no sustained instruments in this song. There's the sax, but the guitar is just kind of going bloop, bloop, bloop. The bass is basically a percussion instrument in the song. Boom, 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 right? There's nothing holding long notes in the song, and I'm like, there needs to be more sustain in the guitar. And I started thinking about when I have a little guitar amp and I turn the compression on, what does it do? I'm like, it starts compressing fast. Like my guitar pick is compressed right away, and it sustains that note long, right? Jimi Hendrix, same thing, all that distortion and compression on it. His guitar, instead of sounding like a plucked instrument, now sounds like a bowed instrument, basically, right? Because it's holding the notes. So that was my thinking when I moved here. I'm like, well, let me just crush the heck out of the beginning of the waveform and see if I can't make the guitar sound more like a voice or a saxophone. So that's what I did. I came down and I, same kind of techniques here. So harsh. Let me just turn on the other part of what I ended up having to do with that, which was I had to do the same thing with the guitar here that I did with the sax. So I already showed you how I did that in a second. There, that killed that a lot, right? Big difference between those two. Right? Versus... Okay, so I put that on the high end there, and now I'm like, okay, I want that guitar to really be in my face, so I came down, I set these mostly in the middle again, I came down to the attack, I turned it to 0. Woo, that kills it, right? Naturally, I might end up... in that range with the lead guitar. But again, I was being lazy and not wanting to make 2 tracks, so I made life harder on myself, and I was trying to find a way to control the clean guitar as well as the lead guitar, and I wanted this to be in your face, so I kept going to a shorter attack time. So you can hear it. Too much. And I liked that right in there, where it's just getting the notes of the guitar, but not the pluck like I wanted on the bass. I'm converting it to a less percussive sound. I'm going for a more sustained sound. So that means I have to start chopping in. If the attack is here, I'm chopping into that attack from the back end by shortening the attack. Does that make sense? And then I shortened the release until it's more in my face. Versus quieter, right? And that allowed me to put that guitar right there. You hear how it's right in front? That's where that short attack and release. Now watch what happens as I change that. The guitar's not in front now. So that idea of letting a little of the attack or the transient through, clamping down on it, and then releasing fast will make that sound more in your face. And I wanted that guitar to be in your face like the sax sounded. The sax sounded. Okay, and I did that by reshaping the envelope here. And watch as I extend the release. Now the guitar sounds like it's kind of like up on the hill or something, right? It's louder and more. It's louder, but part of what makes it sound like more in your face. But the overall the loudest parts of the envelope aren't any louder because I'm compressing them and ultimately limiting them. So that also helped me solve the problem back here, where when this that fast attack simultaneously solved that problem. Here I hear my guitar, but it's not stepping on anything. A little bit there, but so I basically am compressing the heck out of the guitar in the clean and the dirty parts. And I keep not going right up. If I lengthen the attack here, listen now to start stepping on the other instruments. Hear that? It's messing with the sax. It's in the way of it. If I shorten the attack, you still hear it, but it's not stepping on the sax. It's not taking your attention away from the sax. And even the fast release works well there because the slow release will make it so quiet you can barely hear it. And the fast release allowed me to bring the clean guitar up front, but not step on the saxophone. Questions? Before I stop.